are going to happen. Yes. We'll hold on the celebration. Oh, it's on your project. Oh, yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, everybody. My name's Rohan. I have organized a kickoff run for a new partnership between HKS and the Cambridge community that's going to happen at the Cambridge Community Center on May 3rd from 11:30 to 1:30. It's an opportunity to meet over 20 institutions in Cambridge, community leaders, and other organizers out in the field. So if you're really interested in this kind of work and want to keep going forward, it's a great opportunity. There's a sign-up sheet posted on the Facebook online. I'm hoping to see you all there.
Good. Thank you. Other announcements or reports or?
Suchi tomorrow at 10:30 at in 440 at the Ed School. There will be a conversation around gender and leadership at both at the Ed School and then within the education. What are the gender implications for preparing leaders?
Anything else? Eric, you had a peek over the weekend.
Yeah.
Well.
Yeah, I mean, it was pouring rain, it was cold. Didn't want anyone to come out. We started at 10 a.m. We had 30 people there. And so like, all right, our goal was like 79, and it was just really powerful thing. As the day went on, it's just people were coming in with their kids, running late, raining, and by the end we had 77 people there, and it was just this.
Maybe the rain was growing them,
Yeah, exactly. Like, I'm stuck inside the house, I might as well go.
That's great. No, congratulations. Other, yeah.
We hosted an adult ed summit, adult education, at HCSE and had about 50 people show up. 0 of whom were faculty at the ed school, which fits perfectly our narrative. So we're preparing a statement for the dean to recap the summit and sort of show him what we're frustrated with.
That's great. Congratulations. Yeah. Yeah, Mona.
Yes, last Tuesday, we had a meeting with Professor Nicholas Burns, and we got yesterday a formal proposal from Bedford Center to sponsor another study group on Islam and political thought, fully sponsored, fully funded by the center.
Bravo. That's great.
And the most important thing that we will be the ones who choose the professor.
That's excellent. That's great. Yeah, good. She said funny. Yeah. Kevin.
Hi guys, I'm Kevin. So over the last 2 weeks, we've organized 2 discussion groups on diagnosing and overcoming the bamboo ceiling in all walks of life. And this was attended by people from across all the Harvard graduate schools, MIT, and of people of not just Asian descent, but also people of all races. And of next semester onwards, we're planning to organize a larger symposium discussing how the bamboo ceiling affects various walks of life, so not just in the professional field, but maybe in the personal field as well. And we're looking for people who would like to participate or to organize it. So let me know if you're keen on participating or organizing. That'd be great to have you.
Good. Yeah, that's great.
I'm Racheli, and on Sunday night, my team organized a Holocaust Remembrance service for our community, and there were about 40 people there.
It is spring, after all. Yeah, not a.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so this Saturday afternoon is our peak event. We're having a community potluck to talk about the role of supportive spiritual communities. If you happen to know any Muslim grad students or young professionals in the area that might be interested, I'll include a link on the Facebook group for the event.
Great. Yeah.
I'm Michelle. I'm organizing around campus sexual assault and gender-based violence here in the graduate schools. And we have, our actions are going to be set up between May 15th and May 30th, but yesterday our organizing efforts were featured in the Huffington Post.
And didn't Harvard get
Harvard got slammed.
with a Title IX?
Title IX, yeah.
Do people know what that is?
So, a handful of undergraduate students filed a complaint with the Office of Civil Rights that Harvard is not in compliance with Title IX, and there were very likely to be investigation here at Harvard for not being in compliance with Title IX.
Yeah, that was good undergraduate economics.
Sorry, what's Title IX?
So Title IX is,
Sorry, this is too long.
no, well, I'll try to simplify it. It basically ensures that equal opportunity to education regardless of gender.
Cool.
Well, and the whole question of sexual harassment, sexual violence is sort of a core issue. And I've been reading the papers, there's other universities getting nailed right now. It's sort of a whole kind of movement. One of my undergraduate students from last year, Kate Sims, sort of initiated the undergraduate thing, fighting what they were calling rape culture at Harvard. And, you know, at first nobody was paying attention to this. And apparently it's gathered a lot of steam. So it's kind of interesting to see it really reach this kind of level now, and this whole federal engagement, it's now a real thing. Other announcements? Yeah.
I am co-organizing a town hall, which will be Thursday right after class celebration from 6 to 7:30 in Longwood, and the idea is to have a conversation about what the Center for Primary Care at Harvard has been doing well and where it needs to improve.
Well, let's have a pause for everybody. I mean, this week's reflection papers, we had 24 Check Plus papers. I'm not going to read all 24 here. But we did ask, we're posting Talia, Kristen, Neelam, Ellen, and Mona's papers. But they were among a whole array of really thoughtful pieces of work on the questions last week. You know, because the whole takeaway from this course is really it's about learning. It's not about having a successful project. It's about, I mean, that's good, but it's about learning. And it's the learning that you take with you. And that was really well addressed in a lot of the papers this week. On Thursday, our session will be on an evaluation of the class as a whole. And that's what we'll devote the class to in reflecting on takeaways, plus deltas, and so forth. But there's also the official Kennedy School evaluation. And then our own evaluation. I want to urge you to fill them out because it does help. The Kennedy School one is important for a whole variety of reasons. Ours is important because we're learning from it. We're learning it. We're using it to try to learn more deeply how to develop this pedagogy. So it's a really important research instrument as well as a way of evaluating what the experience was. Abel, reflection book?
Hi everyone. Just wanted to give you a quick reminder that the reflection book is both the survey and the photos are due this Wednesday at midnight. Right now we're at about 15% out of 100% with the photos, so there are a lot of folks who still need to get those in. And then the survey actually only has 3 required questions. It's only 3 required questions. So it's your contact information, organizing statement, and a quote, and then anything else is optional. So it's really fast. One other thing that I'd like you to note is, Imbal, can you hold up? All right, so that may appear to be a regular white sheet of paper, but it is not. That right there is the Hollywood Boulevard of this class. There are a lot of people in here that are doing amazing things, and we want to put everybody's autograph on that sheet of paper. So what we're going to do is pass it around starting at the first row. Right there, and as it goes around, just sign with your best Hollywood star autograph that piece of paper, and we're going to get all the signatures in this class and get that into our reflection book.
And there's no checks underneath or anything like that.
No fraudulent checks. No fraudulent checks.
No, that's cool. That's great. We saw some pictures, some of your pictures, Ellen, from your the bake sale. It's great. The pictures from some of the projects, which we don't get to see here in the class, is really great to contribute them so that we can all enjoy them. Celebration. Raquel? Yeah.
So just a quick announcement. Again, the celebration is going to be right after class on Thursday in the Nye room. So we had the Saturday day-long organizing workshop. It's going to be from 2:30 to 4:30. Some of you guys, or hopefully all of you guys, have heard from your TFs about contributing to the celebration. Each section has their own responsibility, whether that's food or decorations. So double check with your TFs. There's a Google Doc in your email. And then also, if you have a talent, we're not going to ask you to showcase it individually, but it's going to come out through one of the activities that we're planning. So think creatively about something that you might want to share and how that might be contributed. And then just if you guys have any questions about what to bring or leaving early, I'm planning it as well as Tulsi, Rohan, and Masha.
Great, thanks, Becca. Great. And yeah, I know we have violinists. I know we have at least one violinist. Yeah. And I suspect, there's a whole lot more. So really encourage folks, if you play, music, bring it to share some of it with it. And then there is the final paper. And the final paper, which is due on the 9th. The paragraphs that we said, if you write a paragraph, what you're going to write about, get it to your TF, and then you'll get feedback. The deadline for that is tomorrow. Isn't that right? Wednesday? At what time?
Midnight.
Midnight Wednesday. So you have midnight Wednesday to put together a paragraph. All right. So that's sort of where we are on all that. Now, last week we looked at sort of at the micro, being a good organizer, what that practice is all about. We've done a lot of work on that, I think, this semester in this class, on the microdynamics of, getting commitments and taking risks and all that sort of stuff. But there's also a macro dimension, because that, of course, is one of the main reasons for doing this. And so I want to focus more on that today, more on how what you've been working on learning this semester could add up, and how you can use it to make things add up. And just to review, and again, these are just like mantras, but maybe act like you heard them for the first time. see if they have a different kind of meaning. The foundation of the whole framework we've been using is those Hillel questions. And that first one probably sounded pretty innocent when we first articulated it, first day of class. If I am not for myself, who will be for me? That's actually where a lot of work has been done in this class this semester, I think, is in that first question. And then how that first question relates to the second one, if I am for myself alone, what am I? That to be a who and not a what is to recognize the inherent relationality of the world we live in, and the centrality of relationship to what we're able to do. And then finally, again, if not now, when? Does that sound familiar too? I mean, it's interesting. I mean, this is, a couple thousand years old. So, people have been struggling with these issues for a long time. Based on that frame, we articulated an idea of leadership as involving the heart, the motivational issues, the conceptual issues, and the doing, the hands issues, because of its focus on the whole, because of its relevance to the domain of uncertainty, unpredictability. We don't know what's happening. How do we handle that? And the definition, again, then was accepting responsibility, which is a significant choice, so I think everybody appreciates accepting responsibility for enabling others to achieve purpose in the face of uncertainty. And those words probably have a different level of meaning now than they may have had when we first started out with them. It's worth kind of reflecting on that. And then organizing we introduced as being a form of leadership that focused on asking 3 questions. And again, these questions probably have different meaning now. First, who are my people? Who's my constituency? Who is it that I'm actually engaged with? What's the challenge from their perspective that can create a goal, that can lead to a goal that we can work toward to address that challenge? And thirdly, how do we develop the capacity to achieve it? The power. That's the theory of change work and the strategic work and all the rest of it. And of course, we focused on the 5 practices that went into that of building relationships, telling stories, strategizing, taking action, and then structuring all that, creating a structure to support all that. Now, that kind of work, one way to think about it is doing it in the traditional domain of advocacy, whether it's the Montgomery bus boycott or changing a particular policy or so forth, as a way not only to solve immediate problems, but a way to go about solving those problems in such a way that they also address a deeper problem of power inequality, power imbalance. So that it's not just a question of short-term, long-term, it's a question of shallow, deep. And sort of going around the solving of problems like the bus boycott, for example, through organizing as opposed to litigation, results in an outcome that isn't just integrated buses. It results in an empowered community, it results in new leadership, and that in turn creates capacity to move forward and to begin to shift some of the reasons for the problem in the first place. And so that's one way of thinking about what organizing is about. And it certainly is about that. Another way to think about it has to do with the way we organize collective effort or collective action, period. And I think this has gotten sharpened for me a lot as I've done more international work and sort of contrasting understandings of how collective action works in different ways. And you know, the traditional approach to collective action was that somebody was in charge. And you know, usually an alpha, usually a male, an alpha male, yes. Somebody was in charge, and then you did what the person in charge said. Or the people under them, and so then that was how collective action was achieved through the mechanism of authority exercised in that way. Well, that has a lot of limitations, a lot of issues with it, many, many issues. And so today, often the alternative that's posed to that is, well, we have a better way. We turn everything into markets, and what we have is individuals making choices. And so, you know, the way we can achieve desirable outcomes for the whole is by creating the right incentives for individuals to make the right choices, and then that'll add up. Well, it does for some things, and there's a lot of things it doesn't seem to add up for. And so it leaves us sort of like, well, is there another way? And the notion of collective action that is arrived at collaboratively, as opposed to just individual choices or some boss telling everybody what to do, is really where this organizing work is. In other words, the notion that we can arrive at effective collective action by collaborating with one another, by opening up the sphere of voice, by driving responsibility downward, and by doing the kind of work you've been doing, exploring leadership teams and how to arrive at that. It's sort of taking another view at how we could create effective collective action. I think this was really highlighted for me in the work we did in Japan before Christmas, where there was just a lot of interest in this whole question of how to organize effective collective action, and the idea of a collaborative alternative to an authoritarian structure that wasn't still a market was very appealing. And so it's made me think a lot about, that's kind of important. And it's important, just think about organizations that we're all part of. And you know, the way our assumptions about what it takes an organization to work, and how hierarchical a lot of those assumptions are, and why that might be not the best way to organize this kind of effort. Not just in the domain of advocacy, but in a lot of possible domains. Third, the whole question of democracy itself. I mean, what the whole thing is all about. At the top of the syllabus, we have that quote from de Tocqueville where he says, in a democracy, or in democratic countries, knowledge of how to combine is the mother of all forms of knowledge. On its progress depends that of all others. Well, that's kind of a sweeping claim that de Tocqueville makes. But what he seems to be pointing to is that democracy isn't simply a matter of individual liberty, but it's a matter of common purpose, of shared capacity, of common capacity. Sort of the premise of most democratic structures is that, certainly in liberal democratic structures, is that unequal wealth, that is authority resting on property, can be balanced by equal voice, authority resting on citizenship. That it's intended to be a system in which everybody's voice can count. And everybody's voice can count because people come together and work together to try to make it count. And of course, you know, we know that there's a lot of problems around all that. And it seems like this kind of work is an attempt to address those problems. A lot of reactions to, and I don't mean to go off here, but A lot of reactions to the dysfunction of government is to say, well, we don't need government, we can do it through private sector. We can privatize everything. Turns out that's a problem. Because if anything, it reinforces the power of wealth and property and undermines the value of voice. That's what political mechanisms are for. But we seem to put so much energy into finding alternatives to government rather than figuring out how to make it work. And this is in the spirit of Albert Hirschman. I think I quoted before, the development economist who wrote this really cool book called Exit, Voice, and Loyalty. And in it he says you can expect any system, whether it's a system of governance, whatever it is, it's going to have problems because things change and things wind down. And so the question is, how do you fix them? And one solution is you leave, you exit. And then, you know, maybe something new gets made, and then that old one collapses. That's the market solution. You exercise your choice to exit. Now, the promise of democracy, though, was different. It was voice. It was that there were mechanisms through which you could make yourself heard within it, and thereby change it, modify, improve it. And that requires really dealing seriously with the whole power question. And so this question of voice versus exit is a pretty important kind of choice. And so the idea that we've been working with of, no, not customers, no, not clients, but citizens, constituents, is a really important idea for the whole functioning of democratic institutions. So, look, I mean, that's throwing out some big stuff, but that's what this is for. So there's the advocacy role, there's the organizational role, and then there's the institutional role of the kind of practices and skills that we've been working on together. And so I just like and one last thing is that we've been working on it in a particular way, with a particular methodology. And that particular methodology has been based on the bicycle. In other words, it's been based on the notion that the only way you learn is to experiment. That risk-taking is inherent in learning. That learning requires experiential input, that you can't go sit under a tree somewhere and figure out how everything's going to work and then just go, this is not how it works. And so learning is a much more active, a much more risk-taking, but ultimately a much more dynamic way of engaging the world. And that's what where's the bike? Oh, there's the bike, over there. And you know, there's risks involved because you fall off the bike. On the other hand, I don't know anybody that's ever learned to keep their balance without falling off the bike. And I think it's like that in a lot of domains. I think if there's one thing you take from this class, you don't take anything but that. I hope you take that. Because that becomes a way of learning, ongoing learning. It's an attitude toward what it takes to try new things and engage new things. So let me just, throw this out there. You've been working on these skills, you've been working on these practices. How do you see using them? What's unique about them? What can they contribute? What settings do you imagine putting this to work in for you? I know everybody's not going to organize a bus boycott tomorrow. Maybe day after, no, I don't know. But, and what about, so just, there's that, and then what about scale? I want to come back and talk a little bit more about scale a little later too, not getting to scale. But let me just throw out that question. How do you imagine actually using this stuff? Now that I've totally sort of, put it in this stratosphere. No, seriously. I know you think about all these issues. In other words, yeah, Kevin.
To me, it seems like organizing is a tool amongst others in the toolkit, and the rest of the toolkit will have things like lobbying, negotiation type, like creating incentive structures, and organizing is suitable for certain sorts of problems, but not necessarily all of them. Although I think possibly the principles in organizing might be useful even in the corporate context. But I'd be interested to hear what you have to say.
But how do you imagine using some of these tools? I mean, you've been working on this. How do you imagine using it?
Right. I can see it in two ways. Most directly, I might organize migrant workers in Singapore to take advantage of legal structures that are in place. So where there's a gap between people's ability to make use of formal structures then organizing is useful, right? Because no amount of additional legal change is going to change that system. And I think the second thing might be in terms of democracy, creating a culture of democracy, and that's something you can't legislate into being as well.
Was there anything that, in your experience this semester, in your project or other people's projects, that lead you to that, to those ideas?
Yes. So in my project in particular, my project has to do with Asian Americans talking about a set of issues that they don't normally tend to talk about.
Yeah.
And I think this is more directly related to my second goal about talking about, say, political issues in Singapore in a culture where we've not really talked about this before, right? And I've seen how creating an environment and the correct space to do this can lead to people talking about things they didn't talk about before and coming together to find solutions that didn't exist before.
Great. We'll look for big news from Singapore.
Thanks.
No, that's... What else? Oh, yeah.
I think for me, something that I really saw in the projects and in the framework is that it enhances legitimacy to decision making, because it's not based on a single person and a single person's expertise. And I think if we look at how some political institutions work, say ministries, the minister may be politically appointed. And so he may not have the expertise to for everything, and often he is bestowed, to make these decisions that usually he may not know. And if he or she is able to work with sort of this structure in, say, a cabinet, I think, and also include NGOs and different stakeholders and the private sector, whatever, it enhances legitimacy to the decisions.
It's interesting.
So I kind of...
I'm glad you shifted gender partway through that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I know that that's been a challenge, hasn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yes, for sure. So I think this is something that I see apply as well to Mexico and other countries and the way decisions are made. I'm very interested in public health and in those types of institutions, especially how resource allocation decisions get made, and often the people that are I'm thinking about other people's projects, people with disabilities or people that may not have a voice often are not involved in the decision-making process. So I think that's really what I take away.
Good. What else? Yeah, Eric.
So the course has been a lot of fun for me because I'm working to start my own organization and launching it, the day after I graduated, or technically it's already launched. But what's great but challenging is that in kind of the social entrepreneur space, there's zero concept of community organizing. And although it's kind of, internally satisfying when I make presentations and people are confused as heck about what we're doing because they're curious about the double bottom line and return on investment stuff. I'm like, no, that's not really what we're about. So we don't win pitch competitions and other stuff. On the other hand, like with the action that we had on Saturday, and we're seeing very quickly with the people that we work with and the community that we care about that the same principles, whether it's 50 years ago or 2,000 years ago, still apply. It's not about just having an app that magically makes your life easier or somehow gets people to register to vote or create wealth and equality because it's some computer code that does that. But it still requires us to sit down, buy a coffee, and talk to each other and try to figure out what we can do together. And it's hard when starting an organization because in this space and place, people still don't get that. People, they know that Barack Obama was a community organizer, but they don't know what that means. And, they just know the term at least now, so they don't think of organized closets. Because that's what it used to be. What made you organize what? So there's a general shift, but it's just really hard, slow work, and I've appreciated the classes force us to do that, and it's forced my organization to be, what I hope it will become. And
it's really an important point you bring up, I think. Whether the model of change and innovation is the genius individual with their radical new innovation, or whether it's organizing people in a different way around a common. I think it's a debate. It's something that needs to be really sharpened and articulated, because the meaning is really different. It's a very different theory of change, and you wind up with something very different in the end in terms of breadth of empowerment, inclusion, and sort of democratic health. So I really appreciate your identifying. Yeah,
Yeah, just following up from that. So my background is in working with NGOs, and most specifically like human rights advocacy groups in some Arab countries. And the funny thing is, I mean, I think I came to the Kennedy School thinking that I needed basically management skills to help those organizations have bigger impact. But this class has really helped me think about some of the challenges that I saw these groups face in the sense of basically like the NGO industry that exists in a lot of countries, and how people just become very comfortable with like making a profession out of doing work that doesn't actually have a base or a constituency. So focusing on programs as opposed to people, and like I think that's a consistent theme that this class I think has really helped me think about not just how to get people to pick up different management practices, but really shift the way they perceive their role as like a non-governmental organization or as a civil society.
that's so important. It's so important. I mean, you can radically disempower a community with NGOs, with all due respect to NGOs. I mean, I don't know if you remember an article we assigned way back then called "Services Are Bad for People," which was sort of posing that kind of argument. And I've seen, I'm sure we've all seen places where, very talented people, essentially there's a creaming process. I mean, in countries where they can begin to earn what they earn working for some international NGO, and it sort of normalizes everything. So, these things aren't black and white, but I think the challenge that both of you are opposing, here social entrepreneurship, very popular, NGOs very popular. Well, this is something different. And how is it different? How is it the same? In what ways does it work, not work? What conditions would be a really, really fruitful argument and debate to have, I think. And I really appreciate your both pointing to that. What else? Yeah,
My comment is related to what Eric said, and I'm starting my own venture as well when I step out of here. So the learning that I'm taking from this class, I now don't see myself as an entrepreneur asking for money, but rather presenting an opportunity to others where they would, I'm doing this to educate children and to make sure that they are learning, having the right life skills as they grow up, and how this is an opportunity for you to work with me, rather than having that full approach of, oh, please give me some money.
Good. I wonder when the advocacy groups are going to organize and have collective bargaining with the foundations. I mean, instead of being seesaw, being whipsawed against each other, it's all this competition for stuff. You should have a union, and just go to the foundations and say, okay, I don't know, maybe that's a pipe dream, but I know in the States there's enough seriousness for that kind of conversation. This Gettysburg project that Archon and I and some others are involved in, on trying to look at ways of revitalizing democratic practice in the U.S. That's actually one of the ideas that's popped up there. Because you have a lot of groups like National People's Action, domestic workers, and so forth. And the whole deal is you got to go and out-present the other one. And then you make yourself really different from everybody else. And so it fragments effort all over the place rather than unifying effort. So it's a good point. These are some key things that are being raised up here about this sector and about this whole domain that really, really matter. Yeah.
This isn't something I've thought through all the way, but
oh well, then you better not say it.
But I'm gonna be working at a law firm after I graduate, and I've just been kind of thinking about sort of what I've learned here, so like how that could sort of be useful in that space. Like I feel like it can. Yeah. But I'm excited to kind of figure that out. If that makes sense. But I feel like there's a lot of unhappiness. There's a lot of like very interesting hierarchical sort of institutional stuff in those spaces. Yeah. And the model itself is in flux right now. Just in general, the whole sort of law firm model and sort of billing and all these sorts of things. So there's a lot of space for innovation. So I'm just kind of thinking through like what sort of the relationship building, sort of thinking about common purpose, sort of like
think it's really interesting. I really hope you go there. I mean, you think about collaborative structures as opposed to the way the partner system works and the whole thing. How constituents, how clients.
In terms of like ways you can sort of more creatively like collaborate on like a transactional level. Cause I won't be doing litigation work. I'll be doing transactional stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, I got like,
All right, so there's a study group forming over here. Anybody you know coming out of law school wants to work on organizing in the law. I think it's something I've noticed is in a number of domains where people are being called to their work through a values motivation, like healthcare, for example, healing, and they find themselves in institutions that go in the opposite direction, either for bureaucratic or for economic reasons. And so here, I want to be a healer, but guess what? I'm going to be an accountant, and I'm going to be a rule follower. And how does that match with healing? And I'm just observed in the last 3-4 years, just an explosion of interest in the whole world of how health provision is being organized. I'm not talking about the policy stuff, but how it's actually being organized, whether from AMSA, the Medical Student Association, Primary Care Progress based at the medical school here. It's not a domain you would expect, there's going to be all this interest in organizing. But, let's face it, people that go to medical school, that's a pretty privileged kind of deal to be able to do. But there's a dissonance there between values and action that seems to offer some real possibility of change. And maybe the same thing with lawyers. You never know. No, but it's interesting to think about what generates this dissonance that makes change the direction you need to go in. It doesn't just have to do with being poor. I think it has to do with the experience of things that are unjust. That cuts across a lot of ground. What else? Yeah.
Well, just going off of that, I'm in education, and before coming here, I was in a standalone middle school, 6th, 7th, 8th grade, and really the school culture was mainly concerned with like obedience and control, and getting students to comply with the way we wanted them to act. Do these values plastered all over the wall, but no one ever inhabited them in any of the school actions or functions, that went on. And if we're really concerned with educating and preparing motivated, caring citizens, then we should build the structure of the school on care and justice, and not obedience and control. And so I just feel like this class has really been just in the social norming of every section, and the way that it's very explicit, the way we always have feedback at the end, and we never cut that short. I think it just shows a lot of integrity, and those very specific tools I see can relate to just my own classroom, and really making that explicit and also being unapologetic for this is just the way stuff should be done.
Yeah, the unapologetic is really important. This is not like just touchy-feely stuff.
Yeah.
This is like really what it's about. I appreciate that. And Sushi's in the EDLD program. There's other students involved over at the ed school. How many ed school students here? You see, there's a lot. Look at this. There's a whole deal there. There's a whole. Not just classrooms, but how the systems are organized and what the role of education is in our societies, and in this country and other countries. I know people working with the old school, just tell them, make them do, and that's not adequate for the coming world. You're going to work in that stuff. That's a domain of incredible significance. And I know we were hearing at the ed school about Lucia's project in LA, just sort of Lucia Moritz, who taught last year in this class, her residency was at the LA Unified School District, which is sort of defined as anything but unified, but very much, sort of bureaucracy personified. She put together basically kind of an organizing campaign within it, organizing teams of teachers and administrators to do this instructional reform, but like doing it like a campaign. Leadership teams even like found the space within this bureaucracy to sort of try to birth something new, something fresh, which was really inspiring. We all heard her presentation a couple weeks ago, and it makes you think about, maybe it doesn't have to be the way it's been. Maybe there's fresh ways. What else? Education stuff. Yeah.
For me as a long-time organizer, I think what I've learned in this class is really leverage for me to bring back work that stopped 4 years ago because I stopped doing it because I burnt out, and really embracing the snowflake model, and seeing that this locally it died down, but nationally it hasn't. But what happened locally for it to not move on? And during the class, I've actually been able to restart that the anti-deportation work that I used to be doing, and through one-on-ones and through actual commitments and building a leadership team and them organizing an event and all the resources that people have. It's really brought back this new level of energy, not just in myself, but the people who are part of that movement, but also for them to see that it didn't have to die with me, but that we can also still carry on.
That's great.
So I think that's really important, and that reflection piece too for that.
That's great. Glad to hear it. So we'll be looking for big news from Revere.
Lowell.
I mean from Lowell, I'm sorry.
No, I'm from Revere, but the largest work happens in Lowell.
Oh, but she was working in Revere. Yeah, but you are from Revere.
I am.
Yeah, okay. I gotta get my New England stuff straight. What else? Interesting domains here to explore. Yeah.
Yes, I don't know, when I was at the university, as a cultural director, the president said once in this interview, he said, you interpret your post. And to follow up with what you're saying, to find a new way, and you're wondering what are all the values and yet you want to bring in what you really believe in. And I said to him, is that a good thing or a bad thing, what you're saying about? He said, it's a good thing, interpret. You interpret every post. You give your set thing that you're supposed to do, but how do you interpret it? And I find that's very interesting, and I would use it a lot with my students. I said, interpret your post, and they would grasp it. So they widen it and deepen it, and we go along with them, with the student. We go along. Because once it's positive and it's moving,
What are other ways you can, yeah, Kristen?
Similar to what Shane is saying, I think it's similar. I feel like I've left the book real wealth of guiding questions in the way that I move forward and the choices I make, any situation where there are a variety of options to lead with these questions like how might we do this to build capacity? How might this be used to create more advocacy in the community? Who shares our interests? What resources are we using? I think can really change the conversation.
What made that real for you? Those questions.
I think sort of this might be a little dark, but I think reflecting on
Dark's
missed
okay.
opportunities. Reflecting on missed opportunities.
Not dark at all.
Yeah. And how having that as a part of the conversation can really shift that thinking.
Yeah, that's not dark. Fear of that kind of darkness keeps us from winning. Or confusing that as being dark. Yeah, no, I really appreciate that, because we've all experienced that, right? This, what was the Sitkin article that we started with at the beginning, one about strategic failure? And he said, why are they giving us stuff to read about failure at the beginning of the class? Or Carol Dweck or all that. Why, because that's where the learning comes. And, it's not like you seek it or love it, but yeah, that's how we improve. And it's so easy to say. It's another thing to develop the emotional muscles to actually mean it and handle it. And I know people have been struggling with that. I struggle with it every day. But it's so important to appreciate. What else? Yeah, back then.
I think for me there's a shift in just how far the status quo can be changed. I think I had a certain floor, so like, okay, this is probably not gonna change, and then going from there and changing everything kind of beyond that. But now, like, especially through coaching and like seeing how those questions in just 15, 20, if you're asking certain questions, kind of like what Kristen was saying, having those questions to go a little bit deeper with people and to get to what they really value. I mean, I feel like I've been doing that accidentally, like, ever since coaching. Now I'm just curious, like, what do people really care about? It's hard for me to now just have kind of the, like, more surface level conversations because I'm genuinely wondering, what kind of makes people tick, what would they want to change and what would they want to see change. And that's changed, for me, the level of possibility in change.
So it's very interesting that you've been ruined now. You can't. No, it's really interesting. It's like provoking the curiosity, but it's also really interesting about the experience of possibility in in a relational context can open up sense of possibility about the macro too. It's sort of about the possibility of changing systems, of changing mechanisms of the law, of changing that sense of possibility seems to be really precious. That's really interesting. I appreciate that. Oh. Yeah.
So I'm a community fellow. I work for a climate change nonprofit in Harvard Square, and I'm the vice coordinator of a statewide network called Massachusetts. We have 4 staff members for that network, and it's been a really interesting experience for me to take this class because I've learned so much about leadership, and that for those 4 people who are on staff, I've been realizing that we've been putting too much emphasis on the campaigns and not enough emphasis on leadership development. And that's been a huge learning and shift for me in this class, and kind of rethinking what it means to be an organizer and how to do my job, and for the other people in my organization, how they do their jobs, and being more coaches instead of being more direct and like telling people what to do in the campaigns. So that's been a huge shift for me, and I'm still trying to figure out like how to bring that learning to my organization.
That's what I was going to ask.
Yeah. I had like a 3-hour conversation with a few people from my organization on Sunday, which was really good. But it's hard. I mean, one of the main organizers was like, I want to keep doing stuff. You're telling me that I'm not going to do stuff anymore. And I was like, no, it's just changing. You might be a coach instead of telling people what to do or making the decisions for other people. So that's been really big.
Boy, push it.
Huge change, yeah.
The climate change thing really needs that desperately. And it goes to this big question about mobilizing versus organizing. Which was one of the things we talked about in one of their first classes, about confusion, about sort of spending down resources versus creating new resources that goes with organizing. And that's a really important dimension of the work you're doing. May make some folks uncomfortable over there. Good.
Definitely.
Yeah, Dimitri.
Yes, like I said in class, I found that I'm not as big brother as I thought I was. Nowhere near what I thought I was. From the first class about narrative, the tools more or less brings out common sense, which is meant to be common, but apparently not. In the sense that, yes, if you do not tell your story, someone else will tell it in a different way, and it can do a lot of damage to what you're trying to achieve. The idea of being in charge and allowing others to express themselves. It's like learning to learn theoretically. Yes, it's working.
It's challenging, isn't it?
Yeah, but I like it too, so it's working.
I'm glad to hear that. I appreciate that.
What it just made me think of is the power of narrative, just in terms of, for me, identifying why I care about what I care about, using that as a source of helping me move forward, and also I think connecting to what Phil was saying in terms of engaging with other people from that space, which is so much more deep, so much deeper, and so much more meaningful.
You think that's also true at organizational levels? I mean, an organization or an effort that is able to define itself, articulate itself, as opposed to just be, we're against that, but here's what we are. Sort of a story of us, but of an organization. Whether that would have the same kind of effect in terms of empowering people within the organization. Yeah, I'm just sort of extrapolating what you were saying about your own personal experience and saying, well, would that also apply at an organizational level? Yeah, I would think so too. We're thinking about what travels to what level. No. Yeah. Oh, Michael and then Susan. Oh, it's okay. All right. We'll go. Yeah.
So, when I think sort of the practice of one of the practices of this class that I probably take away as the major takeaway for me, and that I've already started to apply, is this whole idea of relationship building and the one-on-one. I've never thought about it before that in the way we've been introduced to this class, and I don't know. I think before taking this class, I was always very stable in kind of the social context I was in, and always related to the same people and talking to the same people. And I think sort of reaching out to somebody new to sit together with them, to have a one-on-one, is kind of an intervention that opens your sort of your boundaries in terms of intervening into something new and creating something new, and sort of almost thinking a little bit of the snowflake of reaching out. And I don't know how you guys feel about it, but I think it's always still, when I do it, it's still like a little risk, and it's still like a challenge to sort of go there, especially with somebody new and talk to, or who, I don't know what their position is or what their perspective is. But I think this is extremely valuable. At least I've started to apply that in many different areas of problems already, and I think this is kind of a pretty powerful tool. And the beauty of it is it can also be sort of measured so nicely, right? You can have you can set your goal, and you can sort of almost check off, even if it's just, either you do it or you don't do it.
That's right. Yep, that's we should take that and write it up on the wall. No, it's really true.
I think Billy, I don't know if you both said already, but also Lucia's work was so powerful for me, because I think in education reform, we have lots of discussions around positional authority versus informal authority, and then sort of like what's the leadership practice that goes with each, or what can go with each. And I think with Lucia, it's also interesting to see that a system that really promotes that the higher up you get in the hierarchy or the positional authority, the more the incentives are for you to operate as a dot and not as a snowflake. So to be able to try to have that leadership practice with a level of positional authority, I think is pretty disruptive to the system. So.
That's really an interesting observation. Yeah, and it's interesting that they want to keep her there. Huh? Yeah. So, over here.
I was just going to say, taking off of some of the earlier comments about public narrative, I've been thinking about this class and how it made me focus on self, but self in the context of others. And so I feel like even though the self us now was very much emphasized about the class, for me personally, it was pretty focused on the self. And as I'm a joint degree student, so as I go to the business school next year, which is a very different organizational and cultural environment, I want to continue this, and I'm trying to figure out not only the lay of the land over there, but who I can I've been talking to people and sort of doing the diligence now to understand how things work, who are some kind of natural allies, but just, it's been much more other focused, and I don't think I could have gotten to that point without primarily focusing on myself and the story of self, and feeling like I had the legitimacy and the passion and the understanding of the issue and why I'm committed to it before having those conversations with a new environment that I haven't really immersed myself in yet.
Really, how did you get to the self-understanding?
A lot of one-on-ones and a lot of coaching. I was telling someone in my section this earlier, but I got to a point probably 2/3 of the way through the semester where on a given Sunday I would be having brunch with someone and coffee and talking to somebody in the library, and then I realized like 4 conversations in a row that I'd had with completely different people all had to do somehow with my project, and sort of telling my quick story about why I was excited about it, and just, again, sort of to that point of talking to tons of different people that I would never ordinarily share that with, and making myself okay with sharing and being vulnerable.
Yeah, it's interesting too how greater clarity about self comes through interaction with lots of others. I mean, it's not the model of withdrawal, it's a model of engagement as a pathway to self-understanding and self-differentiation. Because of course, if there's no self, there's no relationship. So that's a very interesting dynamic. Over at the business school, Rebecca Henderson will be an ally. She teaches this class on reinventing capitalism, and they did a public narrative workshop there this year. Was anybody here was in that? No. No, they, yeah, were you there?
No.
No, I just wanted to say that, no, they did a all-day public narrative workshop over there.
It's interesting because it seems to be something that, I mean, you said this in the CPL workshop. I don't know if you said it in here as well, but the difference between public narrative as the polish on the outside versus the glow from within.
Yeah.
It seems like there's a real hunger for that kind of people sharing, but they don't get to it until their second year. That's what I've heard from people, but they seem to be very self-packaged the first year and trying to figure out how to break down those walls, because it seems like people want to, but there needs to be somebody who moves first and does that. So try and find the confidence to maybe be that person.
Good.
That does it.
No, it's
together.
great. No, it's great. It's interesting how packaging walls you in when you sort of think it's going to be something to project outward. Because then you've created this kind of wall of what you're supposed to be in. Well, anyway, it's a lot of possible philosophical rumination. Yes?
It's really interesting that you're part of this school because a lot of business students actually came out to our meetings and to my team, and I was worried that I was going to know how to communicate with them. And it was a huge lesson learned on my part about making assumptions and about when we work in communities that are different than our own, and just assuming that we are so different and the ways which things are so different. And really just tailoring it, not just around your project, but around what brings us to those projects. And it's a really interesting lesson I've continue to employ, whether it's business students or
This new generation is raising a lot of really interesting questions with a lot of institutions in a lot of countries around the world. And we did it, we did our bit. No, but in a sense it's true. No, but I mean, really, it's like pushing the envelope on this stuff and not just accepting the way it's been. And because it's not adequate. So that's, it's interesting stuff. And you find generational change sometimes ripples through institutions, and becomes a sort of dynamic for shifting the way these institutions operate. Because they don't work, they're not satisfying like they used to be. I don't know if anybody watches magazine, but it's a good example of how it used to be. Yeah.
I really appreciated in the last class that you mentioned for a second that there were undertones in the reading that were like kind of macho.
Oh yeah.
And so that was like something that I struggled with throughout the class around just like the religious context of the reading and like pro-family traditional gender norms. And so I like struggled to get into that and to understand like the role of my organizing and the role of my own identity as Chinese Vietnamese American, as queer, and I think like throughout the class I was kind of zooming in and out for what it means to like organize locally, and the last set of readings was very much about just progressive politics and what does it mean that there are so many different identities. So I think zooming out, it's kind of like organizing around identities and equity and inclusion at MIT. What does that mean within the global context when the context that we're working in is religious and has these gender norms that I feel like I try to redefine. So I feel like for me it's been kind of like zooming in and out and kind of understanding my work in different scales.
I think it's really important to find ways to hear lots of voices in their authenticity, including religious voices. It's a powerful dynamic in work. And I don't know, I don't mean to just focus on that, but there is a kind of secular fundamentalism in a lot of academic institutions that say you can't talk faith here. And it turns out to be a pretty powerful motivator for a lot of people, a place where their values come from. And I love, like Susan Christopher in that Story of Us model that she does. She sort of says, in my language. She's very careful to acknowledge that there's multiple ways to express that which is authentically real to us. But we have to create spaces where we can do that, and from whatever perspective. I don't think you're arguing with that. I just think there's a lot of work there. It's like the difference between saying we're going to remove this from the public sphere versus we're going to figure out how to engage with this. And that strong pluralism is kind of how I think of it, is really crucial along many different lines. And it's one reason I love the story work, because the story work allows you to go deeper. And it allows you to recognize the power of the particular experience and identity and all the rest of it, but also access values underneath that are values around which people can come together. What else? Yeah, Mary?
One of the things I saw working for an elected official, you see a lot of organized groups come, and they organized, and oftentimes on opposite sides of an issue. And the last issue we worked on was clean water regulations. And we had one group that wanted the regulations passed and one group that didn't. And one of the reasons I came here was to say there has got to be a better way. Everybody agrees they want clean water, but they're disagreeing and shouting at each other and us is how we're going to do it. And I think what I've seen is that there may be, if you can organize people and work, if you wait until everybody has organized into their groups pro and con against a certain set of legislation, as opposed to trying to use this method, this model, and reach out to a community beforehand and make them part of that discussion rather than just letting government staff create those rules for people to fight for and against. There's a way of making it coming out with something that the whole community can buy into, that meets their values, and that lets them feel that they have achieved something within a democratic setting. But I'm not sure they always feel now, because the way it's now set up is one side loses and one side wins. And so there's a whole different way of organizing communities and government to make better decision making. But one of the things that I was trying to find when I came to Harvard, and I think I may have found it here.
Well, that would be exciting. No, but I mean, I think that it's tricky. Collaboration assumes some kind of equality. In other words, it's hard to establish grounds of collaboration when you come to the table with so many more horses than I do, or whatever the equivalent might be. Because what tends to get it tends to just reproduce there. And so the question of collaboration and equality, I think, are really deeply connected. And so if I'm sitting down with Exxon, I'm going to need a whole lot. I'm going to have to bring a whole lot to create some kind of balance with Exxon, because we're not going to agree. And no matter how many one-on-ones we have, we're not going to agree. I don't think. Because there's some deep fundamental differences in values and interests. And I think in the desire to find common ground, we also have to appreciate the significance of real differences, and often the necessity to contest them, because they're often associated with this inequality thing. I don't know if people haven't read this new book, Capital, by, how do you say his name? Thank you, yes. Yeah, it's really interesting. He was being on the radio with Tom Ash, today, debating with the economics guru from here at Harvard.
Mankey.
Mankey, yeah, it was a very interesting conversation going on there. But it goes to, the book is about sort of deep structures of inequality. And so we want collaboration, but we also have to be real about the conditions that enable collaboration. That's why the power piece is always an important part of all this. And yeah.
Did he agree?
Oh, yeah, just fine, yeah. Yeah, he was converted. No, it was very, you know what, the debate, it was very interesting because he couldn't make the connection between wealth and power. And see what Piketty, yeah. What he was arguing was that if you can't separate the economics from the politics, they flow into each other, because the creation of enormous economic inequality translates into politics that are anything but democratic. This is where
Thank you.
I can't pronounce names of economists. That's where Minky was just not, no, economics is like the bridge over to the power piece is just not there. It's very, very interesting. But there's going to be a lot of debate about this, and you know, this stuff we've been working on has a lot of relevance to that debate, and how we do things. What else? Corinne.
This course has taught me, and the project that I'm working on has taught me the importance of communicating urgency. Because if it's not communicated, then people will just delay and delay the action.
How did you learn that?
Well, in my project, we're working with the dining service staff, and the administration keeps saying it'll get done, but they have to do it in their terms, you know, through their steps, and it hasn't been done since this issue has been brought up in September, but it hasn't, you know, they keep delaying it, but they don't give us a deadline of when they will solve it. So it's been a struggle to push them on that.
Yeah. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's not opposition. It's just a whole other set of priorities. But often that puts the person who wants to create change in the position of having to make it urgent, because otherwise it simply doesn't get addressed. And then that leads to various forms of confrontation and polarization and so forth, that people say, oh, we don't want to do that. But come on, I mean, often that's what it takes to create urgency, to make it real, to say this is not going to go away. So, appreciate that. You know, there's a lot about, I mean, we talked about this last week about creating tension and the significance. It's sort of, it's great, all the collaborative stuff, but then there's the tension creating stuff, which is also a critical part of all this, and how that works. What else?
One of the things that I've also learned is that I cannot protect the cause from the people.
Wait, say this again?
I cannot protect the cause from the people. It's not a matter of I'm trying to use people to reach the cause or to fulfill the cause. The people are the cause. And I have to entrust people with the cause. And that's the whole thing. And I had to go a long journey for this, I'm afraid. And maybe I'm not there yet even, but I still I'm realizing it, applying it to different things. But it's very, in Egypt, for instance, it will make a lot of difference. Is that it's not a matter of that, yes, I see the right thing and I have to convince people to follow. No, it is people decide what's the right thing.
Yeah.
Can I just add to that?
Sure.
Yeah, I was trying to say earlier on, there's no one to save in the world. People have to save themselves.
Well, we're getting pretty profound here. No, but it's there is a deep connection between the macro and the micro. See, to me, that's one of the things that always appealed to me about organizing. Was just my first work in Mississippi was that the connection between people finding the courage to act in a different way created the potential then to change the whole structural context in which they were acting. And so it wasn't like either or, it was both and. And the bridge was collective action. The bridge was the individual joining with others that then could begin to create a mechanism to actually change the institutions of segregation in the South and from that. And that's when I got ruined, was experiencing that in a real way and seeing it happen, and it just became very, sort of intoxicating, this idea that you could actually connect these two. That you didn't have to go off to make change up there and that change made here wasn't just going to stay there, that you could put them together, and that was really the only way to make real change. So, you know, in a way, we're sort of going back and forth between micro and macro here, or structures and agency, or individuals and communities. And I think keeping that perspective is very important. And that's something that this work can contribute, I think, is to make that link between the two. So it isn't, I hate that, you know the starfish story? Somebody want to, everybody know the starfish story?
I don't know.
I'll tell it.
Yeah, okay.
So this hangs in my childhood room. I love it. So it's about this kid and I think his grandfather or something, and they go to the beach, and the kids, there's all these starfishes out on the beach, and the tide has gone out, and so the beach is scattered with starfish, and so the kid goes down to the beach and like picks up a starfish and throws it in the water, and keeps throwing them, and the grandfather says, why are you throwing these starfish in the water? The tide's just going to go out, and there's going to be a whole bunch more. And he picks up another one, and he throws it back in, and he says, well, it sure made a difference for that one. Right?
Yes, that's the story. Now, why do you love it and I hate it?
I love it because I think it's important to realize that if you're doing something that's going to work toward the greater good, that it's not a waste. Like, that we can continue to strive towards something good at the end of the day, and that everybody counts, I guess, is what it.
So what's the challenge to that?
Well, he's alone, and he's the only one doing it, I guess.
Maybe we can go out there and see what's pushing those starfish in, and we can build a wall to protect us from all the starfish. And no, it's too often it's used as an excuse to I think, to justify failing to grapple with the structural realities, or failing to grapple with the fact that, no, it's not enough. You know, you have to, it's sort of, I guess the way I think of it is the difference between charity and justice, and that justice requires that you ask why. And in other words, that not just what, but why. And then the why question takes you into a lot of domains that are really challenging. And you have to ask, well, how come all those starfish are coming in? And how come there aren't 1,000 people saving them? And how come, and those are really important questions, I think. Which doesn't take away from, yeah, that starfish makes a big difference, no question about it. I take that point. But everybody get what we're talking about? I mean, this is it's sort of the service versus organizing kind of thing, in a way. Yeah.
Another thing that made me think about was, and I don't think I've heard this before, like
You've been sheltered here.
in terms of like making excuses for good intentions. Sort of generally, just the idea that you come into a space and you intend to, you're not doing any harm per se, but actually you can do like a fair amount.
Yeah, that's true.
But that's what that means.
All right, well, good. Last one. Then we
Oh, no. I just wanted to kind of bring together Mila's part.
Okay, good.
Like, because I think sometimes you can go in the extreme where you get focused on that justice without remembering why it was you cared, without remembering the individuals. And I think it's good to have that balance of both.
Right. That's good. Thank you. So, let's do some takeaways and a few pluses and deltas, and then we'll be on our way till Thursday. Some takeaways from today. Okay, Eric and then Mary.
It was great to be able to hear a lot of different voices and people's stories when functioning.
So that's a plus for pedestal.
Yeah,
yeah, no, it's great to hear lots of voices. What else?
Just the diversity and breadth of views that you can put, that different people can put organizing through or see it being able to.
Yeah. It took a while for me to discover that, by the way. Because you learn these things in a certain context, and unless you're pulled out of that context, that's your understanding. And the power of cross-contextual learning, it's why having so many different kinds of projects is so rich. It's enormous, because you can't stay within the assumptions. You've got to move across, and it's really helpful. What else? Other takeaways, pluses, deltas? Yeah.
I really appreciated, sorry, I forgot your name. No.
Hi.
Yeah.
Sophie.
Sophie. I really appreciate your point about even if you get it, there's this challenge about working it into an organization and building that culture. And I still don't know how to do that. And maybe you can teach another class, Marshall.
You'll go back and transform Australia and then tell us about it. What else? Any takeaways? What?
So one thing that you can do a class about is democracy that you have talked about today, because even in the democracy class, you don't teach us. So is that the optimum version that we should go for, or we need to work even on the version that we have currently?
We sure do.
So you have a lot to say.
Right.
So
Okay. Making more work from, yeah.
Just that, you know, all of these practices aren't just nice and fluffy and touchy-feely, but I think it's, sorry, your name was Ellen mentioned that they really lend legitimacy and integrity. I think those are two really powerful things.
Right. So,
This is partially from the discussion that came out of your comment, but and also from the readings, just a key learning of that you can't get away from the political and everything you're doing, even if you're working in one little node, like you're in this big context and you have to be thinking about the bigger picture and how to engage with that.
I wish we could rehabilitate the word political to where it actually means what it meant.
Yeah.
You know, affairs of the polis, I mean, affairs, civic affairs. But it's sort of been so, anyway. What else? What's a good point?
Which one? Okay, what you said made me think about the idea of people having to make a choice to change or to want change. And it made me think about this quote: "If you have come here to help me, you are wasting our time. But if you come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together." And that makes me think about organizing and we have to come together.
Who's that?
That is Lila Watson.
Good. What else? More? Yeah. A little more time for something? Yeah.
Well, I definitely appreciate the education that we've gotten. I think there's a lot of wisdom that this class is kind of uncorked in a celebratory metaphor.
It's a liquid wisdom.
Looking forward to Thursday. No, but I think, you know, I can get in a mindset of like relying on school to teach me. And what I've learned is that there's actually a lot of wisdom in just from hearing what people have learned outside of the class and in practice, to trust that a little bit as well.
That's great. That's great. Okay. Yeah.
I've learned that like the leadership rich model is like creating a song to sustain them so people can enjoy it later on.
Wait, say that again.
Being leadership rich is like creating a song that people can enjoy later on, so you don't burn out. Like it reminds me of like discipline. I came to Boston because one of our organizations was inspired me as a document in Texas. And then came up here, translate. And that was hard for me. And in the movement work, that's something real value in organizations are not meant to exist.
Yeah. Yeah. I love the idea of a song. Very nice. Good. We'll see you on Thursday.
Full of, I'm like Santa Claus.